watching it.
Yeah, and I've never shown the piece. I mean, I've never shown my pieces where I'm like sitting on a stage in this situation before, and I didn't get to see them large like that. But I really liked hearing the audience's reaction. I mean, I guess I have in like more of an academic context, like giving a lecture, but this felt a little different. And I don't know. I usually the way I think about how the piece needs to be shown is in relationship to the content of the work, like both in terms of the scale and on what kind of surface and all those kinds of things. In the case of this last piece with drama, like I really wanted the audience to have that kind of theater extend into the space of the gallery. But on the other hand, I mean, I think I don't know if you struggle with the same thing. Lately I've been thinking, gosh, I should just get all of my work in its entirety like out in the web so that it can be more widely disseminated, and you lose a lot in terms of certain parts of the experience of being in the space with the work, but yet there's, the chance for so many more people to see the work. And so I don't know, that's something I've been thinking about more and more, that might be a downside from coming from like a painter's background, is this kind of proprietary attitude towards the pieces, like they're supposed to be in a gallery or you can see them in my studio, But I've been thinking lately about, how that would change the idea of audience and, what the pieces could mean, if they were more widely disseminated that way. So I don't know if that answers the question. It's a big question, right? Like it's but yeah, I think it's very interesting.
We can take one more question if someone has one last question for Joey. Yes, we have one up here in the front. Raise your hand so he can see you. There we are.
Hi, Joey.
Hi, Michael.
Do you have any precedents that you look back on as far as artists go?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of precedents with painters, but also with people doing performance and and movies as well. I think someone like Pipolati Rist was really exciting to me when I first discovered her work. Who's a performance and video artist that deals with the macro and micro in a really beautiful way. Like she has this piece where the camera is kind of moving across her body and I think her husband's body at the same time, and it creates this incredible sense of moving over a landscape, but it's actually their bodies. I think someone like Carolee Schneemann, who that's an example of work that I know must have been in my sort of consciousness without it being realized. Her pieces where she's making out with her cat basically, or she's kissing her cat. And that when I showed Me Time for the first time in Chicago, a lot of people coming to the gallery were like, asking me about that connection. And we had actually just had Carolee come to Texas State as a visiting artist, so I was thinking that must have, and you were there, right? Michael is one of my very wonderful artists who also is a former student of mine, so that he knows that.
Also, would you consider yourself in a dialectic with any of those artists that you mentioned, as far as your work connecting and referencing Carolee or Pipolati Rist, as you mentioned?
Do you think like having a conversation with their work?
Right, as the work goes, if the viewer can see that connection.
Well, I think that kind of relates to Angela's question in the sense that
who your audience is.
Who your audience is, that becomes, and that is something that I'm really interested in, is how the work, that relationship between the work and the viewer, again, is so defining in terms of the meaning. Because like when David was talking about how Me Time made him think about the nature of love, that was such a beautiful and surprising, I think that says as much about you, David, as it does about, the piece, because I've had, I've watched people watch that piece in the gallery, and some people, they get like really uncomfortable and grossed out by it, and they're kind of, so I guess it really depends on on the audience. I mean, when I showed Me Time in Chicago and all those people were talking about Carol Lee's work, I think it definitely was making that, connection. And I would hope so. I mean, I think to me the work makes more connections with painting and the history of painting, just because that is my process. I think a lot about how a painting can be defined by medium, but it also can be defined by an approach, sort of like flexibility and an adding of layers. And so, historically, painters that do these kind of really kind of strong figurative work, like Max Beckmann or something, those are people that I think about, but I don't know if that comes across, I guess it depends.
Well, and in the end, the art speaks for itself, and not only the art, but the artist speaks so eloquently. And thank you all for joining us
Thank you,
this
David.
evening.
Thanks very much.